Among the many figures who shaped the foundations of early Christianity, the Apostle Paul stands as a towering influence. His journey from zealous persecutor to passionate defender of the faith remains one of the most dramatic and transformative stories in biblical history. But Paul's unwavering commitment to spreading the teachings of Jesus Christ came at a steep cost. His path, marked by relentless dedication and spiritual resilience, eventually led him to the center of the Roman Empire, where he would face his ultimate trial under the brutal reign of Emperor Nero. His final days, marked by persecution, courage, and unwavering faith, culminated in a tragic yet powerful end that resonates through history. How did Paul, a man so devoted to his mission, come to meet such a fate at the hands of Nero, one of Rome's most infamous emperors? What were the events that led to his martyrdom? In tracing Paul's final journey, we uncover not only the details of his death, but also the legacy he left behind, a legacy of resilience, conviction, and undying devotion to his faith. Years of preaching, adversity, and unrelenting pursuit of his mission culminated in the Apostle Paul's voyage to Rome. Paul was once known as Saul of Tarsus, but his conversion from a bitter opponent of Christianity to one of its most fervent supporters is evidence of how much he believed in it. Paul established churches and communities that would serve as the foundation of the early Christian church by traveling far after his conversion and sharing the gospel of Jesus throughout Asia Minor, Greece, and beyond. In his later years, Paul's ministry brought him into direct conflict with both Jewish and Roman authorities. After being arrested in Jerusalem for allegedly violating Jewish law, Paul faced an uncertain future. However, as a Roman citizen, he held a crucial right: the ability to appeal his case directly to the emperor in Rome. Recognizing that this appeal represented his best chance for a fair trial, and potentially his only opportunity to preach the gospel in the heart of the empire, Paul exercised his right, requesting to be tried before Caesar. Upon his arrival in Rome, Paul was placed under house arrest, where he awaited his trial. Despite the restrictions of his confinement, he continued to reach out to the Christian communities he had helped establish. Even as a prisoner, Paul wrote letters that would become pivotal texts within the New Testament, epistles to the Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. These letters, written from confinement, carry a tone of resilience and hope that has inspired generations of believers. For Paul, imprisonment was not a barrier, but a new setting for his ministry. His writings from this period reflect a man whose faith was undeterred by physical constraints. Yet Rome was a city on the brink, and the atmosphere in the capital was growing increasingly hostile towards Christians. The political landscape was fraught with tension, and Paul's prominence made him a focal point within a community already under suspicion. As he awaited his trial, Paul sensed the dangers that lay ahead, yet he remained steadfast in his mission. In 64 AD, Rome was engulfed in a catastrophic fire that raged for 9 days, devastating much of the city. The Great Fire of Rome left thousands homeless and the capital in ruins, sparking widespread anger and frustration among the Roman population. Rumors quickly circulated, suggesting that Nero himself had ordered the fire to clear land for his grand architectural plans. Facing mounting public resentment and needing a scapegoat, Nero turned his attention to the Christians. Christianity at this time was still a nascent and largely misunderstood faith, viewed with suspicion and hostility by the Roman populace. The Christians' refusal to worship the Roman gods and their perceived rejection of Roman values made them convenient targets for blame. Nero capitalized on this animosity, accusing the Christians of starting the fire. The accusations marked the beginning of an intense period of persecution, as Christians were arrested, tortured, and executed in public spectacles intended to divert public anger from Nero. For Paul, this shift in public sentiment represented a significant danger. As one of the most prominent Christian figures in Rome, he was especially vulnerable to the wrath of the emperor. Nero's vendetta against the Christians meant that leaders like Paul would bear the brunt of the persecution. The charges leveled against him, preaching a forbidden faith, rejecting the worship of Roman gods, and challenging the authority of Rome itself, were tantamount to a death sentence. Paul's rearrest following the fire was far more severe than his initial house arrest. This time he was confined to the infamous Mamertine prison, a dark and isolated cell beneath the bustling streets of Rome. The Mamertine prison was known for its harsh conditions, and Paul's confinement here was a stark contrast to the relative freedom he had experienced during his first imprisonment. Cut off from the communities he had nurtured, Paul faced the final days of his life in solitude with only his faith to sustain him. The charges against Paul were significant. He was accused not only of spreading an illegal religion, but of defying the emperor by preaching a message that undermined the authority of Rome. His teachings promoted loyalty to a higher authority, God, and advocated values that challenged the moral and social fabric of Roman society. In the eyes of the state, Paul was not just a religious leader, but a subversive force, someone who threatened the unity and stability of the empire. Paul's trial under Nero's rule offered little hope of mercy or justice. Nero's hatred for Christians meant that the outcome was almost inevitable. Paul was condemned to death, his fate sealed by an emperor who sought to suppress the Christian faith through terror and violence. Yet, even as he faced the prospect of execution, Paul remained steadfast. His letters from this period, particularly his epistle to Timothy, reveal a man who had come to terms with his mortality and was prepared to meet his end with courage and grace. As a Roman citizen, Paul was granted a comparatively merciful death by beheading, sparing him the prolonged agony of crucifixion that so many other Christians faced. His execution was carried out beyond the city walls, a site reserved for those condemned by the state. Tradition holds that Paul was led along the Via Ostiensis, the road leading from Rome to the port of Ostia, to a place where executions were commonly carried out. Paul's final words, recorded in his letter to Timothy, express a sense of fulfillment and readiness. "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near," he wrote. In these words, Paul saw his life as a final offering, a sacrifice made in devotion to Christ. His death was not a defeat, but the completion of his earthly mission, a final testament to the faith that had transformed his life. At the place of his execution, Paul's life ended with a swift stroke of the sword. His death, though tragic, became a powerful symbol of faith and resilience. Paul's martyrdom would inspire countless Christians who saw in his sacrifice the ultimate example of dedication to God. His final moments embodied the courage and conviction that had defined his life. Paul's death did not mark the end of his influence. Rather, it magnified his legacy, cementing his role as one of Christianity's most significant figures. For the early Christian community, Paul's martyrdom served as a potent reminder of the cost of discipleship. His letters, written from prison and often under the threat of death, continued to circulate among Christian communities, offering guidance, encouragement, and theological insight. Paul's writings became foundational texts within the Christian faith, shaping the doctrine, practice, and identity of the early church. His teachings on grace, salvation, and the nature of the church provided a framework for understanding the faith and its relationship to both Judaism and the broader Roman world. In the face of persecution, Paul's words became a source of strength for believers who saw in his life a model of endurance and devotion. Ironically, Nero's attempt to suppress Christianity through persecution ultimately strengthened it. Paul's martyrdom, along with the deaths of other early Christian leaders, galvanized the faith, providing it with a legacy of courage and conviction. The contrast between Nero's cruelty and Paul's devotion became emblematic of the triumph of faith over oppression. Where Nero's legacy became one of tyranny and excess, Paul's became one of hope, resilience, and unwavering faith. Over the centuries, Paul's influence has endured, and his life and teachings remain central to the Christian faith. His letters continue to be read, studied, and revered, offering insights into the nature of faith, the meaning of sacrifice, and the power of transformation. Paul's life and death exemplify the strength of conviction that lies at the heart of Christianity, a strength that endures even in the face of persecution. The Apostle Paul's passing is a powerful illustration of the tenacity and fervor of faith in the face of tribulation. Paul's dedication to his purpose and faith in God remained unwavering while facing exile, jail, and impending death during Nero's rule. His latter days serve as a reminder of the price of discipleship, a life completely given up to a purpose that went beyond one's own comfort and security. Paul's martyrdom challenges us to reflect on the strength of our convictions and the legacy we choose to leave behind. Intended by Nero to silence a powerful voice in the Christian community, Paul's death instead became a source of inspiration. His writings, filled with wisdom and encouragement, continue to shape and guide the Christian faith, providing a model of dedication and spiritual fortitude. Through his life, teachings, and ultimate sacrifice, Paul's legacy endures, demonstrating that true strength is not found in avoiding suffering but in facing it with courage and hope. His journey, from persecutor to apostle and finally to martyr, remains one of history's most powerful examples of transformation, faith, and the enduring power of belief.